Growth Pod is brought to you by Genero, a leading growth agency in the Nordics. We interview marketing experts, business leaders, and entrepreneurs to uncover the stories and strategies behind profitable growth.
Today's guest is Fredrik Lucander, the Vice President of Marketing at Wolt, where he oversees global marketing, which includes media channels, brand and promo strategy, and other growth-related activities. And Wolt is a delivery company active in 25 countries. It was founded in Finland in 2014 and acquired by DoorDash in a 7 billion euro deal in 2021. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So you have a pretty unusual background for someone who works in marketing. So could you talk about how you kind of ended up where you are now?
Of course. I don't know why it's so unusual today, but it still is quite an unusual background, I guess. If I go back, to my high school years, 18 years ago when I graduated, I really liked the hard sciences. So I like maths, physics. I studied macroeconomics also in high school. I really enjoyed those things, and I enjoy having a formula that can be solved. And I think that's why when I went to university, I picked the obvious ones like finance, microeconomics. Those were all solvable in a way. I think I was sort of ignorant, thinking that marketing is this sort of fluffy subject that doesn't, where you don't look at numbers that much. My view, again, ignorant view back then, was that a company will set aside a certain part of their P&L, a certain part of their revenue, let's say, a few percent, and then the marketing team will work with agencies and figure out, okay, now we're gonna put the money towards that, and then hope for the best and see how it goes, and without proper tracking. And of course, that's an unfair view, but I had that view, so I picked finance, again, microeconomics. Then I went into management consulting for about 5 years. I feel like in my peer group, you could either choose investment banking or management consulting. Those were sort of the two appropriate ones. So I did management consulting, strategy and finance related projects for large stock listed companies in the Nordics, which was a really, really good learning experience, but also not maybe the thing that I wanted to do for the rest of my life. Mm-hmm. But 5 years into management consulting, I got a call from an ex-colleague who was at Rovio Entertainment, which is the Angry Birds company. He was in mobile gaming. And he asked if I had ever considered going there. I hadn't considered going there, but then I was rather intrigued. I went there into a strategy and finance related role. And it turned out that one of their biggest strategic sort of competitive edges that they had, or that they were building up when they went into free-to-play gaming from the classic games, was this user acquisition, basically. So online digital marketing. And so I started working with them quite a lot. They were starting to spend more. The idea was that with free-to-play gaming, you have higher lifetime values and you can invest more into the cost per install and so on. And at the same time, when they were scaling that, of course, the board wanted to be very sure that there's a very good governance model for making sure that when you invest a second euro or the next euro, that you're getting some marginal return on that. So then I built these together with the team, day 3, day 7, return on ad spend, early indicator models for the games, for different geos. And I really found that intriguing. I noticed that we could double the spend, a huge amount, like over 100 million euros going into online marketing, where basically you could track exactly what the gross profit is that you're getting, or the net revenue that you're getting from that investment. And so, a couple of years go by, then I get a phone call from Wolt, which was also for a strategy and finance related role. So I took that. I was still, passionate about strategy and finance. I go there. It was more about building growth models for the funding rounds, building up the FP&A strategy team. And then I asked Mickey, who was my boss at the time, I asked him, who's also the founder and CEO, could I start building the marketing organization, because we had 6 countries, the local teams, basically they were generalists, they were doing all sorts of things, and they were handling, things like handing out flyers in the mall, working with influencers, buying offline media, and then they're also doing the Facebook ads. And I knew that, that's not how it looked like at Rovio. At Rovio, you weren't buying Facebook ads if you were doing the other things as well. So I started hiring from the mobile gaming industry, started hiring data scientists and also campaign specialists, also our head of growth today, Ang Nguyen, and got a really good team together. And then I think it was a Saturday when Mickey called me and asked if I want to take over the organization. I was really happy to do so. And so that's my journey to marketing, and I love it. I'm never looking back.
I think that's why, given your background and kind of your interest, that's why you have a different perspective on marketing. You mentioned when we talked offline that you kind of look at marketing as a resource allocation or capital allocation problem, where the primary objective for you is to drive growth, and the channels, the tools they're agnostic, as long as you're able to maximize growth. So let's talk about that and kind of tease that apart. One thing that I'd be curious to know, because when you're thinking about growth, and typically there's like this divide between performance and branding. But how do you, as someone who's just focused on growth and long-term growth, how do you think about, for instance, branding and making brand investments? How do you make the trade-off between, how do you know when to invest in branding?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would maybe even take a step back, and I'll try to return back to that particular question. So for me, there are really a lot of things that contribute to growth, but let's say 3 things. One is how are you perceived by the customer? So we're talking about the product in itself. Do you have the right selection on the platform? Do you have the right level of affordability? Do you have the right level of convenience? All of those fundamentals need to be in place in order for you to be able to do efficient marketing. So you need to actually have a good product. At least that's the way I see it. Then another part that has been really successful for our growth is also that we've had a really, really strong team, and particularly a strong launch team. So when we're talking about going to a new country, these are really hungry, smart, energetic individuals that fly over to, let's say, Kazakhstan. They live there for 6 months. They assume the role of the marketing manager, the GM, operations manager, customer support head, and they start building up the business, getting the office, all of the practicalities, and then they start replacing themselves by recruiting. So, that has been a strong pillar for growth. The product in itself, that's the one that's going to keep the conversion up, keep the lifetime value high, purchase frequency, retention, all these things. Then finally, I would say, as a third thing, marketing. And marketing is extremely important, because there's so many tools that you have in the marketing toolbox. You can open up the toolbox, and you can either do short-term marketing, and you can really see like impact on the numbers immediately. I can decide with the team today to run a campaign for the weekend, and we will see direct business impact of that. So there's that piece of it, and then the brand building. Coming back to your question, that's when you need to figure out whether it strategically is needed to solve a business problem in whatever country or city that you're in. So I don't think about marketing for the sake of marketing. Nobody in our organization thinks about marketing for the sake of marketing. We think about marketing, again, as a toolbox to solve whatever your business challenges are. You might go into a country and there might be a lot of competition. The share of voice for competitors is really high. And then you do all of the things that I mentioned earlier with selection, affordability, and convenience. And it still turns out that people just don't, like the word of mouth in a crowded market might not be strong enough to do that. So then you have to do a little bit more top of funnel activities. You need to be seen, you need to be heard. They need to know about the, what makes you unique and all of these things. So that's when we do more top of funnel marketing as well. But it's always for a business challenge. And it also depends from geo to geo. Like I just heard a couple of weeks ago an interesting statistic about the difference between a Western market like the US. This is specifically for apps and mobile gaming, but I think it's true for many other industries as well. In the US, 70% of the budget will go on performance marketing in the case of games, for example, and 30% will go on above the line brand marketing. In Japan, where we also operate, it's the flip of that. So 70% goes into brand building, whereas 30% goes into tactical marketing, like performance marketing. So you need to also know where people are consuming media, how they're consuming media in the country, and also how they're accustomed to kind of be persuaded.
So you treat, like you said, these are all just tools, and you use whatever tool you need to get incremental growth. In like a very mature market for you guys like Finland, you may need to use different than in a newer market or a different market like Japan, where you're also active.
Precisely. And there's no like right answer or playbook from that perspective. Like it's all test and learn. And of course we start building up and fleshing out our playbooks as we go. Now that we're in 25 countries, over 200 cities, we have a lot of learnings that can be applied, but no new country is the same. So there's going to be nuances, differences in the competitive landscape, even if the number of competitors are the same. It's going to be differences in how people consume media, how people want to receive communication and things like that. So those things are different.
That's really interesting, because when we think about expansion, obviously it's very difficult. And like you said, every country is different, but you've clearly been very successful at it. And just some context, like I think, was it just a few days ago or maybe a week ago, Oda, the grocery delivery app service from Norway, they came to Finland 1 year ago, spent a lot on marketing, brand awareness, probably also just building out the operations. They now announced they're pulling back. So it's very difficult. How have you guys been able to, has there been any kind of, what would you say have been the defining key factors to being able to successfully launch or scale to 25 countries?
Yeah, I think the launch theme that I talked about earlier, those are really, really important. But I think the work that happens before that as well has been key. So going back to the times when I was building the growth model for investors and for funding rounds and these types of things, of course, we had to look at each city and the unit economics, which we still do today. The same principle still applies, but we had to look at the unit economics for each city, do a lot of desk research before we launch and say, okay, this is the GDP per capita. These are the way that people are interacting online, how much they're buying, for example, in retail, or how many people are accessing smartphones and so on. When I remember it was maybe in 2018 or 2019, when I was looking through, I had built the next version of the growth model and looking into everything that we had inputted there. I think there was something like 3,200 variables that had been plugged in to make sure that every city that we will operate in the future would be as accurately portrayed from a unit economics perspective as possible. Because if you don't get the unit economics right, then the lifetime value of the users are not going to be there. You're not going to be able to invest, and so on. So you really want that flywheel to start turning by making sure that you're actually getting gross profit from the users that you can invest back into the engine.
I want to go back to one thing you said, which was that everyone kind of in your team or within the marketing organization thinks of, they think of they're just using different tools to drive growth. And I think you said you have like 200 marketers at Wolt. So how do you because that's been, I think, a challenge for a lot of companies, is that people work with, let's say they work in performance, they're really focused on Facebook ads. They do Facebook ads as basically day to day. It's very hard for them not to get focused on just trying to optimize and manage performance within the Facebook ad account. So how do you get the entire team to really think about that they're all playing a part in driving growth and not just focused on like their specific things that they're doing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm not sure if for every individual out of those 200 people that you just mentioned, that we need to do that. It's more about the people who are making the capital allocation decisions. So I do want to make sure that the people who are working on programmatic or display ads are very, very good at display ads, and they care about display ads. The people who are working on the Google account need to make sure that they care about Google, and they're very good at optimizing Google. So the actual individuals or the operators, I would say that they do care about their channel, but then the way we designed the performance marketing organization, if we start with that, for example, is that they're tied more to geographies than to the specific channels. So we have about 30 online channels that we run for 25 countries. Not all countries will have the same 30, but on a ballpark. So the way that we think about it is that one person who is running something for, let's say, Poland, they can be running multiple channels, so cross-channel for Poland. They need to care about the growth of Poland. They don't need to care about defending why Facebook is not working that well today. So they can then capital allocate. So that's one way that we did it. There are so many different models where people have built really, really strong channel-specific teams. Like you'll have one team for just Google, or just universal app campaigns within Google, or something like that. We didn't go that route, so we wanted to make sure that they care about the growth of that country. Having said that, they also need to be good at the channel, because otherwise you're probably wasting a lot of money, or then you're leaving a lot of money on the table if you don't make sure that they're good at it.
That sounds like it's like a good approach. How do you, given that you're overseeing these different teams and over 20 markets, lots and lots of different channels and tools, how are you able to not go crazy with all the complexity? And how basically, if you think of yourself as a capital allocator, how do you make those decisions?
Yeah, I think the first step was that in 2018, when we started building up the performance marketing organization, we immediately started with getting AppsFlyer, getting the right attribution models, making sure that we have the data pipelines in place so that we can follow and track everything we do. Then when the whole iOS 14.5 thing happened with the IDFA deprecation, the first thing we did was make sure that we're putting a lot of effort into building a probabilistic attribution model that allows us to track to the best of our ability the things that are happening on Apple without, with the probabilistic attribution model. So I think that's the first step. So we've really tried to make sure that we have the data in place to help us make those capital allocation decisions. So we can say, okay, in performance marketing, we're quite sure how we should distribute our money in every country. And that depends on the country. In some countries, back in the day, I remember that Denmark was the only place where Snapchat worked. Or, now you can see the same thing with TikTok, that some countries, TikTok just works a lot better because they're quicker at adopting TikTok or whatever. So I think within performance marketing, that's true. Then when you zoom out a little bit and you look at the offline channels and you look at how much effort you should put on things like CRM or things like influencers, or how much you should put on promo codes, all of that. That's when, especially with the offline models, we've been working a lot on the marketing mix model to get a statistical understanding of what the uplift is, and then we measure everything on what we call CPID, which is cost per incremental delivery, or then cost per incremental new user, depending on what the goal is.
Yeah,
and then we use that as a measure to prioritize, and some channel might have a really good CPID, like cost per incremental delivery might be really good, or the cost per new user might be really good, but then it doesn't scale. So it's really about finding what the incrementality for each channel is, and then you allocate according to that.
So it's safe to say you kind of, let's say you built some kind of dashboard where you can track pretty much every effort that you do along those two metrics.
The dashboard, like a holistic, beautiful dashboard, is work in progress. We don't really have that, to be completely honest. We do have individually, we have the ability to look at certain campaigns, or within performance marketing, we have very nice dashboards to look within performance marketing. But the zoomed out view is something that we have to piece together. And the good thing is that Wolt has been built on data. So all the way back to its founding in 2014, Snowflake, Looker, these types of business intelligence tools, or data warehousing, all the way to the business intelligence tools, have been something that we've put a lot of effort into. And when we hire, we also make sure that people are quite comfortable with pulling their own data. So even though we haven't yet consolidated everything into a beautiful dashboard, I wish we would have, but I think each individual is able to kind of pull things into their own views and create their own Looker views.
How, I'd be curious to know, because a lot of companies, as in most companies, 99% of companies are not there, are not at the level where you guys are at in terms of your scale and sophistication. So if you were, let's say if you had to start over in a small marketing or department team, let's say 5 people, how would you go about, what would be the first steps that you would take to kind of build this same level of understanding and data-driven, like true data-driven growth-focused marketing?
Yeah. I think I would do I would probably perform similar steps again, which would be, again looking into attribution models to the best of today's ability, getting the right toolings, and start investing into, depending of course on what you're selling, but again, solving business problems through marketing and being really, really adamant on making sure that you're not doing marketing for marketing, but you're doing it to solve a business problem. I think that's one thing. Another one that I would really encourage is strong analytics and documentation of things that you do. So even if you don't have the best A/B testing or split testing, or you don't have the best incrementality studies, or you don't have a marketing mix model that tells you statistically where you should be investing, you still know something. You can still look at a graph and say, well, that worked or that didn't work. That cost a hell of a lot of money. We should probably not have done that. Proper documentation of the analytics, getting people in that are at least business savvy enough that they'll be able to draw conclusions on whether something worked or not. So when I look back at our 25 markets and I look at how much we're doing every week, we have McDonald's campaign there, we have burger weeks, pizza weeks, sushi weeks, we have different promos, we have big paint the city blue type of campaigns, ATL campaigns. We have all sorts of campaigns all the time live. But the discipline to document was not there in the beginning. And I think that's something that we've learned, quite recently, and something that I wish we would have done all the time.
Yeah, I mean, given the scale you guys are at, there must have been the accumulated learnings must be massive. Are you using those to kind of build? Are you building your own? Well, I guess you're building your own playbooks, and you mentioned the dashboard is work in progress. So you're building essentially the Wolt way of this growth model.
Yeah,
that's fueled by your own learnings.
Yeah, exactly. So if we think about how we've grown, there's been very little churn in terms of employees at Wolt. So people have stayed when they've come in. So we've evolved as an organization. We've gotten learnings. We do learning sharing within marketing organizations. So, Kazakhstan might tell Germany how they've done something. And we have these learning sessions. That's really important for us as well, to have these forums. But that's, if we would all be run over by bus, all of a sudden, and then we would have to replace ourselves, then again, going back like 4 years ago, we would probably have been in some sort of trouble if we would have to replace everybody. Now we've gotten much better at documentation. Now when a new person comes in, it's a little bit easier for us to onboard them, show them this is what works. Let's say we get a new head of marketing in country Y. They'll be a little bit more equipped to know what works within this industry than what they would have been, for example, 3 years ago.
Well, after the merger or the acquisition by DoorDash, how have you guys been getting a lot of learnings from them, or have you kind of noticed that actually we're doing things at a pretty good level here in Finland and Europe? Yeah,
they're a lot bigger than us. They have a lot of learnings to share. There's been back and forth, like Wolt has taught them things and DoorDash has taught us things. And when I met them the first time, I think a year and a half ago, I flew over to San Francisco, met with the teams there, and it was like meeting aliens that walk and talk like you, that sort of they've lived in a parallel universe, and you could talk forever. You could talk like endless amount of the topics would never run out when you talk to people like that, because they've faced the same challenges, many of which they've solved earlier, and we're still in that phase, or many of which we've solved where they're still kind of struggling with those. And that was really cool to see. So it's been back and forth. I think we have even people flying over, living here. We have people flying over to live in some of the DoorDash countries, and I think that's great. And also, Miki Kuusi, again, founder, CEO, he is now head of DoorDash International, which means that we also have some DoorDash brands in that family. So that's Canada, Australia, New Zealand, which are DoorDash brands, but part of Miki's organization now.
Is there anything in general that you feel like we as Finns or Europeans could learn from Americans when it comes to growth or performance marketing?
Yeah, I think one very clear thing is the discipline to look at input metrics at a very, very high frequency. So we've always looked at our data. We've been very adamant on making sure that we're following the data and we're making decisions based on that and all of that. But I think it becomes more and more difficult as you become bigger, and it's really fascinating to see how DoorDash has been able to maintain that, even though they're so much bigger than us. So they are able to stay extremely agile, and our organization is only as good as how agile and how well they communicate within the organization themselves. So I think that's something that we've definitely learned. They look at they ask the why a lot more to make sure that you're really understanding what's driving what, why is something working, why is something not working, and really double clicking until you have a very clear hypothesis and you have a really clear test set up. And these are things that we've done as Wolt before as well, but I think it's a different level of rigor, and I really, really love seeing how they pull that through as a big company, and something that we as Nordics should Nordic folk we should definitely learn that as well, that kind of rigor and discipline on all of those pieces.
How can you combine this kind of like analytical, business savvy, rigorous, hypothesis driven marketing approach with like this creativity, deep understanding of just like human nature and psychology? Like, can you combine the two in the same people, or do you have to build a team of with multiple people that kind of a different approaches to marketing, or even one step back, could you even build an organization that's just like focused on these business savvy people who just...
You have to have both. Like I think it's really important to recognize your own weaknesses. My definitely a gap that I have is putting enough effort into the brand side of things, like look and feel and tonality and these types of things. but I have really, or we as Wolt have really amazing people that work on that, and they really put a lot of effort into making sure that we stay on brand, that we are, that we put enough effort into brand development. So there are individuals that can do that and should do that and should be focusing on that. But at the same time, you need the business savvy people to translate that into numbers, because at the end of the day, all investors will care about is, are you showing over the next 10 years, what they want to see, and what they want to see is probably not a nice, just a nice brand, but they want to see that nice brand has converted into numbers, which are usually financials. So you need the brand, you need the savvy people, the business savvy people, and you need the brand people. But I think the ratio would be so that that at the end of the day, someone translates the brand piece into numbers.
Okay, that makes sense. We have to wrap up here pretty shortly, but I just like to ask, out of personal curiosity, what do you think about marketing's role and ability to influence customer behavior? And what I mean is, you can either take the approach, which is that marketing's role is to acquire customers, get people to try the product, and if the product is good enough, they're going to stick with it. And some people are going to become light users, most people, and some people are going to become heavy users. But we can't really influence that. Our job is just to bring people in. The other approach is that we should spend a lot of time on retaining customers and reactivation and all those things. What's been your kind of experience, and how do you think about marketing? Is it just about acquiring customers, letting them kind of sort themselves out, or do you also think that we need to pay a lot of attention to make sure that we actually get the most value of the customers that we acquire?
Yeah, I mean, you have your in Finland you say your own cow in the ditch on that one, because you want to make sure that the lifetime value grows so that you can invest more, right? So I think about it, and we think about it in the whole life cycle, because if I can increase purchase frequency, if I can increase retention, then my lifetime values go up and I can invest more into getting the customer in. So from that perspective, I think it's really important that you don't just look at one part of the funnel or one part of the life cycle, but you need to look at the full thing. And that's really when you get the wheel spinning, is when you can also impact on the lifetime value side of the equation and not just the CAC side of the equation.
Okay. Final question. I know since you're part of a public company, you can't make any forward-looking statements, but just in general, on a personal level, what kind of excites you most about the current marketing landscape? Is it, AI or any other kind of opportunities or challenges that you find particularly exciting?
Yeah, I think the AI piece is really exciting. On a personal level, I find that really exciting. It's also a little bit scary because of how much of a black box it is. I think there are use cases for it in marketing, but then at the same time, we really have to understand how to use it, because if it is a black box, if you use it even for copy, or if you use it for SEO or anything like that, if you don't really know how that text is coming, like where is it coming from, are you infringing on some copyright or anything like that? Also, when using it for creatives and things like that, it's a bit dangerous. But from my own perspective, what I'm really excited about is marketing for things like Wolt Plus, which is our subscription model. You get free delivery with a monthly subscription. I think that's really cool, teaching people about that. I don't think we've cracked the marketing part of it yet, but working on that. Then another personal topic that I think is really interesting is, how do you change the habit of people who have been doing their grocery shopping in a certain way forever? As you know, we have, for example, in Finland, we have K-Market, Kesko on the platform. We have our own Wolt Markets. We have a lot of grocery shopping opportunities. We have also other retail opportunities to that you can use on the platform. And I have not just a feeling, but I know that it's really difficult to change the way that people purchase their groceries. And I think that the last year has been a really cool learning experience on that. How can you better change the way we do things? And of course, we have business-to-business products like Drive with verkkokauppa.com in Finland, and a lot of others like Telia and some others. We have Wolt for Work, which is basically, you can give your employees the benefit of Wolt, for example, for lunch and things like that. So a lot of things from a marketing perspective, not just geos, not just channels, but you also have these verticals. And how do you change the view that Wolt is just a restaurant food delivery player, but how do you become all of the other things as well?
Yeah, it's been really cool to see how you kind of become integrated in so much of our lives and everything that has to do with delivery. And a bit surprising as a consumer. It's like, oh, okay, they do this now. When I open the app and see that you can shop from these various different stores. So it's very cool to see. Thanks so much for coming on. It was really interesting to discuss and learn more about how you guys are doing things over there.
Thank you for having me.
Best of luck with everything.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. You can find all episodes of The Growth Pod on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts.